A tariff is essentially a tax on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive for American consumers and businesses. When a tariff is imposed, it raises the price of items coming from overseas, which can have a ripple effect throughout the economy. The idea is to make imported goods less attractive compared to those made in the United States, shifting demand toward domestic products. By increasing the cost of imports, tariffs encourage Americans to buy domestic alternatives, supporting local manufacturers and potentially creating more jobs at home. This approach is often promoted as a way to strengthen the national economy and protect American workers from foreign competition. For centuries, tariffs have been used by governments around the world to protect key industries, raise revenue for public projects, or exert political pressure on trading partners. In the United States, tariffs have played a major role in shaping the nation's economic history, from the early days of the Republic to the industrial age and beyond. During his presidency, Donald Trump made tariffs a central pillar of his America First policy agenda. He argued that countries like China were taking advantage of the U.S. through unfair trade practices, such as intellectual property theft and government subsidies, and that strong action was needed to level the playing field. The Trump administration imposed sweeping tariffs on steel, aluminum, and a wide range of consumer goods, arguing it was necessary for national security and to rebalance global trade. These measures were intended to revive American manufacturing and reduce the country's reliance on foreign suppliers for critical materials. These tariffs, starting in 2018, sparked a trade war that quickly escalated, affecting not just China but also key U.S. allies in Europe, Canada, and Mexico. Retaliatory tariffs were imposed on American exports, leading to uncertainty for farmers, manufacturers, and global markets. Trump claimed that foreign countries paid these tariffs, but this point was hotly debated by economists and politicians. Many experts argued that the costs were often passed on to American businesses and consumers in the form of higher prices, sparking intense debate over who really bore the burden. The policy marked a dramatic shift from decades of lowering trade barriers, using broad presidential authority to reshape global economic relationships. Trump's aggressive use of tariffs redefined America's approach to trade, setting the stage for ongoing debates about globalization, economic security, and the future of international commerce. The tariffs quickly sparked controversy, igniting a wave of public outcry and debate across the country. From bustling cities to rural heartlands, Americans found themselves divided over the new trade policies. Businesses that relied heavily on imported goods suddenly faced soaring costs, forcing them to make tough decisions. Many had to raise prices, cut jobs, or even close their doors, while consumers felt the pinch at the checkout line as everyday items became more expensive. While some industries, like steel and aluminum, saw a temporary boost as domestic production ramped up, these gains were often overshadowed by broader economic pain. Many more, including farmers, manufacturers, and small exporters, suffered as other countries retaliated with tariffs on American goods. Crops sat unsold, factories slowed production, and rural communities faced mounting uncertainty. This widespread economic fallout led to a coalition of businesses, importers, and trade groups banding together to challenge the tariffs in court. They argued that the administration's actions were not only harmful, but also unconstitutional. Their main claim was simple, yet powerful. Tariffs function as taxes, and under the Constitution, only Congress has the authority to impose taxes and regulate commerce. They accused the president of overstepping his authority, using a decades-old law intended for national security emergencies to impose sweeping tariffs without congressional approval or oversight. The legal battle quickly escalated, becoming a fundamental dispute over the separation of powers and the proper limits of executive authority. Challengers warned that allowing the president to unilaterally impose such taxes would set a dangerous precedent, undermining Congress's constitutional control over the nation's finances and weakening the system of checks and balances. The case raised urgent questions about the limits of executive power, the role of Congress, and the future of American trade policy. With so much at stake for the economy, the Constitution, and the balance of power in Washington, the issue was destined for the Supreme Court, where its outcome would reverberate for years to come. Ultimately, the court's decision would determine who truly holds the power to tax, regulate trade, and shape the economic future of the United States. Supporters argued that Congress had delegated trade authority to the president through laws like the Trade Expansion Act, giving the executive branch flexibility in foreign policy. They claimed tariffs are tools of international relations, not domestic taxes, and that the president needs agility to respond to global threats. Opponents countered that tariffs, regardless of their label, function as taxes and raise revenue from Americans, something only Congress can authorize. They argued the national security justification was a pretext, warning that unchecked executive power could erode the Constitution's separation of powers. The debate centered on whether Congress had truly given away its core taxing authority, or if the president had overreached. The stakes were high. The outcome would define the boundaries of presidential power for years to come. The Supreme Court was now tasked with drawing the line. As the case reached the Supreme Court, the nation watched closely, with citizens, lawmakers, and legal experts all aware that the outcome could reshape the very structure of American government. The air was thick with anticipation, as people from all walks of life wondered how the justices would interpret the Constitution in this pivotal moment. Across the country, Americans tuned into news reports and pored over headlines, knowing that the decision would shape the future of executive power and set a precedent for generations to come. Challengers argued that the tariffs were not just abstract policy, they were real-world taxes hurting American families and small businesses, driving up costs and threatening livelihoods in communities large and small. They insisted that Congress could not simply hand over its core taxing authority to the executive branch, warning that such a move would undermine the checks and balances at the heart of the Constitution. The government, on the other hand, maintained that the president needed broad discretion in matters of foreign policy and national security, especially in a rapidly changing world where threats could emerge overnight. Government lawyers argued that courts should defer to the executive branch's expertise, especially when national interests were at stake. The justices pressed both sides with tough questions, probing the limits of presidential power and congressional intent. They questioned whether Congress had truly authorized such sweeping tariffs, or if the law had been stretched beyond its original purpose. The justices also debated whether the national security rationale was too broad, potentially allowing the president to bypass Congress on almost any issue by invoking security concerns. The court's questions revealed deep divisions among the justices, with some emphasizing the need for strong executive leadership, and others warning of the dangers of unchecked power. The gravity of the constitutional issues at stake was unmistakable, as the justices weighed the balance between security and liberty, and between the branches of government. The outcome would not only affect trade policy and the economy, but also set a powerful precedent for how far presidential authority could reach in the future. At its core, the case was about the fundamental balance of power in American government, and whether the Constitution's safeguards would hold firm in the face of modern challenges. As the arguments concluded, the nation awaited a ruling that would echo for generations, shaping not just the law, but the very fabric of American democracy. The stakes could not have been higher, and the eyes of history were fixed on the Supreme Court. On October 15, 2025, the Supreme Court struck down the Trump-era tariffs in a 6-3 decision, calling them an unconstitutional overreach of executive power. The majority opinion reaffirmed that only Congress can impose broad taxes, regardless of whether they're called tariffs or not. The court found the tariffs were not targeted national security measures, but sweeping economic policies reserved for Congress. The justices warned that a vague national security justification could undermine congressional authority. The dissent argued Congress had delegated this power, and the court was overstepping, but the majority held firm. The ruling set a clear limit. Presidents cannot use trade laws to impose broad taxes without explicit congressional approval. This decision redefined the boundaries of executive power in trade and taxation. It was a landmark moment for constitutional law and the separation of powers. The immediate effect: tariffs on billions in imports are lifted, lowering costs for businesses and consumers. Companies relying on imports will see reduced expenses, potentially leading to lower prices for finished goods. American families, especially those with lower incomes, should benefit from relief at the checkout counter. The end of tariffs also opens the door for other countries to lift retaliatory measures, helping American farmers and exporters regain lost markets. However, industries that benefited from protection, like steel and aluminum, now face renewed competition and tough adjustments. The ruling highlights the trade-offs in economic policy, helping some, hurting others. Policymakers must now support affected sectors while embracing a more open, competitive marketplace. The decision signals a return to predictable, stable trade relationships. For many, it's a welcome shift after years of uncertainty. The Supreme Court's decision fundamentally shifts power back to Congress, curbing the president's ability to impose broad economic measures unilaterally. Future presidents will need congressional approval for sweeping trade actions, reinforcing checks and balances. The ruling revives congressional oversight and may embolden lawmakers to more carefully define and monitor the powers they delegate. It encourages presidents to pursue trade policy through negotiation and legislation, not executive fiat. The decision also reassures international partners that U.S. trade policy is grounded in law, not the whims of a single leader. This new precedent brings stability and predictability to global commerce. Stronger, more durable, international agreements may follow, built on mutual trust and respect for legal process. The balance of power envisioned by the founders is reaffirmed. In summary, the Supreme Court's ruling is a major victory for the Constitution's separation of powers. It affirms that only Congress can impose broad taxes, ensuring executive power remains checked. The decision provides clarity for future presidents and lawmakers, reinforcing the rule of law. For businesses and families, it promises lower costs and a more stable trade environment. The judgment transcends trade policy, standing as a powerful lesson in constitutional governance. In a polarized era, the court has drawn a clear line, upholding the resilience of American institutions. The strength of democracy, the ruling reminds us, lies in the enduring authority of its founding principles.